Matt, needless to say, September 11th changed the world for all of us. But for one writer, the change meant the collision of two of his strongest and most passionate interests, globalization and the Middle East. Three-time Pulitzer Prize winner Thomas Friedman writes a foreign affairs column for the New York Times. He's the author of several books as well. Tom, good morning. Nice to see you.
Great to be with you, Kate.
You know, you've written extensively and wonderfully, in my view, about the post-September 11th world. But you also wrote a lot about foreign affairs prior to September 11th. Should the United States, while hindsight's 20/20, and this is a case of Monday morning quarterbacking, should the United States have been more aware or more ready for attack of this nature?
Well, you know, there no doubt there was a lot of signs. There were a lot of signs beforehand. Now looking back, but you know, I've always felt, Katie, it was not a failure of intelligence that really produced September 11th. It was a failure of imagination. And in some ways, I'm glad that we don't have the kind of evil imagination that really would have been required to anticipate this.
Do you think the establishment became too complacent in this? You know, they were so busy breathing a sigh of relief in the post-Cold War era. As we can see, President Bush is now leaving church, St. John's Episcopal Church across from the White House. But do you think that these other global hotspots simply were not on the radar screen?
Yeah, look, the 90s were a decade of real silliness. It was a decade preoccupied with Monica Lewinsky, O.J. Simpson, and ultimately Gary Condit on the eve of September 11th. So there's no question we took our eye off the ball as a country and as a society.
I know that you have written that in order for the United States or the rest of the world to win the war against terrorism, it'll require more than military muscle. It will require a dramatic and unprecedented effort to change the way the world views the United States and to communicate the positive ideals and values of this country to the world at large.
Well, you know, a lot of people have said, why do they hate us? And to me, the real question is, why don't they see who we are? And part of that is a transmitter problem. We haven't been as effective as we can be in transmitting who we are.
You have Al Jazeera broadcasting anti-American messages and sentiments 24/7.
Exactly.
And what does the United States have?
Well, as I say, that part of that is also a receiver problem. It's a receiver problem on their end. If you have a society, and in the Arab Middle East, this is what's going on, that is really struggling with modernization, okay? Really in a very frustrating and difficult way. Sometimes you can be out there with your message, you know, 24/7, but if people don't want to receive it because they are resentful, because they're angry, because they live in repressive regimes, we could have 10 Al Jazeeras and it wouldn't make a difference.
Well, what do you do then? I mean, can't get in the business of nation building in every nation that's struggling with, you know, modern demands of life.
Sure. Well, I think context really matters, Kate. If there's one thing I've learned in this last year, how people live their lives really matters. You know, people say, boy, Islam's an angry religion. I disagree. I think there are a lot of Muslims who are angry, though, because they are living in repressive, anti-democratic, non-democratic societies. You change that, what is religion? It's just a reflection on your daily life. It's a mirror of your circumstances. You change the context within which all those people live, and you will have, I think, a very different Islam, and the receivers will be receiving our message in a different way.
1 year later, Tom, what has the Bush administration done right? What has it done wrong?
I think they've prosecuted the war in Afghanistan in terms of going after al-Qaeda in a decisive and serious way, very effectively. You know, people say violence doesn't solve anything, and that isn't always true. I mean, sometimes when there are people out there who want to kill you for who you are and not just for what you do, the only option is violence. But at the same time, bin Laden has gotten away, and I feel that in the end of this year, as we now have bled into a whole new story of Iraq, we may be losing the focus on this threat from al-Qaeda, and that's what I would certainly worry about today.
Do you think too much emphasis has been placed on Osama bin Laden as an individual, though? Getting him dead or alive? Is he, or why haven't we captured him yet?
No, I disagree. I think bin Laden is a uniquely dangerous character. He's a bizarre combination of Charles Manson and Jack Welch. That is the most
evil. Yes, right. Really appreciate that.
I mean, no insult to Mr. Welch, but he is the most mendacious, evil guy who has the organizational skills of a corporate a Fortune 500 manager. Guys like that don't come along every day, and it's very important to eliminate them.
You mentioned Iraq, and I can't let you go without talking to you about that. Tomorrow, the president will speak to the United Nations, laying out his case for Iraq. How do you feel? Should we be concerned about a U.S. attack on Iraq? And is this country opening up a Pandora's box, or is it a necessary action when it comes to world security?
Well, I buy the president's argument that Saddam Hussein is a really bad guy who's mixing really bad stuff in his bathtubs, and the world would be a better place if he were gone. But I think to do Iraq, you got to do it right. That means with a united America and with allies abroad. And that, to me, is going to be the real decisive criteria.
And will the allies join in?
I think it depends how we approach it. If we go to the UN, make one last diplomatic effort on inspection, say unfettered inspections anywhere, anytime, 24 hours a day, surprise, and Saddam says no, at least we have a triggering mechanism. So before the eyes of the world, it's clearly he who has refused the diplomatic route.
Tom Friedman of the New York Times. I could stay here and talk with you all morning, but unfortunately we have other business to get to. Thanks so much for stopping by this morning. Great to see you as always. Now here's Matt.